Okay, out there? All right, so today we're going to talk about minor scales. What are minor scales? There's three types of minor scales, and how do they work on the guitar, how to play them, how they differ from each other, and how we can incorporate those into your playing, and also harmonically how they might work as well. So the very first thing is, let's take a look at what a major scale is to begin with. So a major scale, if we start here on this first note of C, for a C major scale, and I play Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. That's C major. Okay, so Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do, Ti, La, Sol, Fa, Mi, Re, Do. You probably already know that scale, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to play that same scale, but we're going to start on the 6th degree of that scale. So that's Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La. That's this note right here. It's an A note. Therefore, we're playing an A minor sound on a major sound. So the major sound starts on Do. Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. The minor sound starts on La. La, Ti, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La. So there's a distinctly different sound between major and minor. And we're playing an A minor here for this example. So if I start here on this A note, we've established that that's the 6th degree of C. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go like this to play up the scale. Okay, so this Aeolian scale is cool, and it was around for a very long time. It has a very dated sound to it. So if you look at like this song, which I'm not going to name for potential copyright reasons, but this is something I'm sure you've heard a lot before in your life. And that show, that's an Aeolian sound. So it sounds really dated. I think they used that scale for the show to make it sound like it was like an ancient sounding kind of thing. So that's what that is. So what happened next with this scale was that, oh, by the way, people still use Aeolian all the time. It's constantly used. In fact, we all play it, and millions of songs are used the Aeolian mode. Anything that kind of does this progression, which we've seen a million times. That's an Aeolian sound because we have this flat 7, right? So if I play, I'll use a looper here, kind of make a little loop here. If I go like, okay, so that's really familiar to all of us, right? That's Aeolian. So then what happened was, the composers weren't happy with that. It just the evolutionary process of it. There's something lacking there, and there's a couple things actually. Something called a leading tone. So what is a leading tone? Well, in our major scale, if we go Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do, we have this note right here which leads into the last note. So it's like whenever you're a little kid, right? You're walking up the steps, and a lot of times you'll skip that last step, like superstitiously. So this guy here would sound like this if we had that last step skipped, which is called Mixolydian. That's a different scale. So the major scale has this nice leading tone. Okay, so they kind of wanted that sound in the comment section. Along the way here. So what happened then was this leading tone, it did a couple things. So like what's your favorite story? What's your favorite book? I don't know. Like I love the obvious things like Star Wars and silly things like that, but just every great story throughout history has to have an antagonist. There has to be a conflict in the story, or the story is just like terrible, right? So imagine if your movie was like, Jimmy got out of bed and he went to work and he went skateboarding, came home, had some I don't know, Chinese food, went to sleep. It'd be the worst movie ever. But if Jimmy went to work and then like a dragon took him away into a fantasy land, or zombies came marching into his store and he was running for his life, suddenly the story has a little more interest to it because now we have this conflict, right? So in music, it works much the same. In Western music, for the major scale, we have this tritone, which is like the center of the octave. If I go like this, you can see that's called the tritone. It was called the Diabolus in Musica, the devil in music, back in the day. It was actually outlawed. You weren't allowed to use this interval. And you can see on a guitar, it's really interesting because the tritone is right in the middle horizontally, but it's also in the middle vertically. And I think that's pretty amazing. So spatially speaking, we have a tritone in the middle and a tritone in the middle. So that's pretty cool, right? I don't know how exactly that happened. Whoever designed the guitar, they did a really good job with that sort of spatial design of that. So the tritone is nothing more than 3 notes to get to an octave. It's called the tritone. 1, 2, 3 notes we get to an octave. 1, 2, 3. So it sounds all spooky, but it was actually outlawed. So before the tritone existed, if you were in a major key, let's say you were playing G major, D's your 5 chord, do, re, mi, fa, sol, right? It doesn't sound really very like a very solid resolution back to G again. It's kind of wishy-washy. In fact, if I go back and forth between G and D, and I stop at any given point, you're not going to be able to tell me what key we're in. Check it out. If I go G, I'm just going to stop randomly. What key am I in? Maybe I'm in D, right? Well, let's try it again. Or am I in G? So I can do the same thing starting on D. Now it sounds like I'm in G again. So there's not really a lot of distinction as to what key is happening there. So this tritone thing was really important in Western music whenever it was finally implemented. I think it's like 1650-ish, right around the time that Bach was doing his thing. Suddenly the tritone came in, and now we had this solid resolution back to the 1 chord. So if I'm playing G, and then I play a D7, boy, that really wants to resolve. Now it wants to go home, right? Wants to go home. I always ask kids this in lessons, like, where are you going after your lesson? I'm going home. Well, of course, that's where you always go. So music wants to go home as well. At least Western music does. It's really interesting. In Indian music, it's not really about the resolution. It's more about the path. It's almost like a spiritual, there's like a spiritual parallel there. It's not really about the resolution. Like they believe in reincarnation, which is cool. I mean, everybody has their different belief systems. But reincarnation is more about the journey, not about the destination. Whereas like in Western world, we're really focused on this destination. And so the music seems to follow suit, which I think is really fascinating. So you can see how the tritone works. If I'm in the key of C, and I go to this G chord, right? So G7, the tritone is going to be T, or that's sorry, mi, do, re, mi, and then T, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, T. Like that's not right. I'm in C. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, Ti, do. So if I go do, re, mi, and then play T, like this, there it is. There's T and there's, okay, I'm going to start the whole thing over again. I got messed up. If it's Fa and T, do, re, mi, fa, and then T, that's it. Okay, so if I play these 2 notes together, there's a resolution there. It's very much like tension. You feel this tension. However, if I flip-flop these like this, we have resolution. Tension, resolution. That's amazing. So you can feel the story resolves there, right? So that tritone being in the 5 chord is so important. You can also see it this way. If I play the F note here and the B note here, if I move in contrapuntal resolution, like 2 ships passing in the night, one's going one way, one's going the other. These notes, this one's going to go down a fret, this one's going to go up a fret, it's going to sound like this. Tension, resolution. Tension, resolution. So now our key has resolution. So I'm playing the key. Hear that if I play without that tritone, it's going to sound wishy-washy. What happened with the minor scales was that this Aeolian mode didn't have that resolution happening. It has a flat 7. So what happened was that they decided to raise that a half step like this. So two things happened, like we mentioned before, the leading tone. Now the leading tone gives you this step up to the note. Like, so when you're walking up the steps, instead of skipping that last step, like when you're a kid, you actually hit that last step. Right? Let's take a pause here and see if I can see what's on the screen. Somebody else got a message there. Hi, Drew. Imagine, if you will, you're in a jam session and you go to improvise a lead, say 4 bars. Please try to explain your approach. Start, middle, and thanks. Acoustic Adventures. Hi, Acoustic Adventure 1. Thank you for joining. Okay, well, I'll take a pause here for that question. So you're playing a blues and you want to improvise a lead, a 4-bar and 4 bars. Approach beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so. The standard blues would be 12 bars. So if I had a 12-bar blues, I would make a little blues here. So if I had a 12-bar blues, let's say we'll play it in G. By recording here. Okay, so there's my blues. How am I going to approach this improvisation? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to play riffs that play over the individual chords, I guess would be my first person. These are dominant 7th chords. I'm playing G7, C7, and D7. There's a video on the channel about how to play guide tones in blues. But what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to play out of this little box like this. This is my G7 chord. So it's D5, G4, B3, B6. That's a G7 chord. Now if you're going to play these concepts or any kind of concepts, maybe start with just 1 octave first instead of trying to expand across the entire fretboard. If you stay in a little controlled area, you can have a lot more success with trying to play something new. And then you can always expand later. Over the course of a lifetime, you keep growing out with all of your concepts across the entire guitar. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to play this G7 chord. Try a lick like this, maybe. So I'm kind of outlining the chord. Here's that lick again. Playing D5 to G3 to G4. So this is a concept of sort of the way Chuck Berry approached his playing. This like thing right there. I'm playing both the major and the minor third on the chord. Sort of like that kind of sound. Minor third, then a major third. You can also bend that. If I go. So there's kind of both approaches. You can bend this note. If you take the 7th and the 3rd of the scale and do a slight bend on those, that will get you into the chord, like playing over the chord. So, for example, in the scale, that's my root, that's my minor third, right? This pentatonic scale. This note right here, we can tweak it a little bit. The best way to do that is to kind of do that schoolyard taunt like when you were a kid. You know you're doing it right when you get that wah kind of sound. So I can do that, or I can do this. So you find those all over the guitar neck. And a lot of times piano players will play that like, or like this one. So if you don't have a chance to bend the strings, you can do the same thing by playing one note below. So over the G7 chord, I'm going to go like this. Now, the 4 chord has a different thing altogether going on. For this C7 chord, right, we have this C7 chord. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to play the pentatonic scale, but I'm going to replace the 7th of the scale with the 6th, so like this. So why does that work? Well, guess what? The 6th of that scale happens to be the 3rd of the C7 chord. See, that's awesome. So now I can make that chord change happen by replacing this note with this note. Okay, again, the question was, how do I approach playing over a 12-bar blues, beginning, middle, and end? Okay, so as far as beginning, middle, and end goes, like, the blues are a little different than playing like a rock guitar solo on a record. There's like a lesson I just did on storytelling. So if you're playing a recording, you have 24 bars to play a solo, or maybe 16 bars. You tell your story by starting with like slow notes, and then you start to build with some momentum. Like, it's like short storytelling, right? You're going to do an outline. Start with slow notes, and then you start to build, and then you do licks or riffs and lines, and you kind of build a crescendo, and then you kind of slow it back down again. And if you have a longer soloing opportunity, you can repeat that process sort of indefinitely. Like Peter Frampton, Do You Feel Like We Do, does a great job of building that solo up and then bringing it back down. He uses the talk box thing as a different sound, changes the timbre of the instrument, brings it back up, brings it back down. Like guys like Jerry Garcia or Trey Anastasio, masters of doing this longer solo where you can continue to kind of build intensity. Of course, all the greats like Eric Johnson, Steve Morse, my favorite players, all do the same thing. So when you're playing a blues, what we want to do is focus more on the phrasing, because you can build crescendo the same way, but you're kind of working more on phrases where you want to kind of have little teeny words back and forth. It's all about the call and response back and forth. And then you can build your intensity by maybe one of the ways to do that is to move up the neck. So if you start here lower in a solo and you got some things going on, as you move up the neck, you can get more intense, and up here you're just ripping, right? So going higher in the neck helps with intensity. Also, sort of the frequency of notes, the speed of the notes, playing faster, playing with more aggressive techniques, all those kind of things help to build the story. But it all kind of comes back to phrasing. So what we're doing here is talking about playing over the 1 chord, over the 4 chord, and we play this 6 instead of the 7. And well, guess what note we have there again? There's the tritone again. So here's what it sounds like if we do that. The 5 chord is a whole different animal. Approaching playing over dominant chords is like a lifetime of study. There are so many different approaches you can use over a 5 chord. Guess the simplest approach would be either to play D Mixolydian, which is a major scale with a flat 7. That's probably the simplest way to approach a dominant chord. Just take your major scales that you know and flat the 7, right? So you have 2 different ways of looking at the modes. You can either think of it as C major starting on G, right? Because G7 is the 5 of C, so the G Mixolydian mode is actually C major starting on G, right? So if I go like this, start there, that's Mixolydian. So you can think of it that way, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best way. Another way to do it is to play like a G major scale that you know, just flat to 7. So now you're thinking of it in terms of how it would be related to G major. So when you play modes, you can think, okay, so the Dorian mode is like a major scale, but it has a flat 3rd and it has a flat 7. So that's kind of how my brain works, I guess. But really, what I do most of the time is play pentatonic scales that actually like are the same thing as the modes but with pentatonic. I call it Pentatonic Substitution. You can do pentatonic scales really well over top of chords and create these modes with pentatonic scales, which is kind of a really awesome thing to do. That's what I do most of the time. On the Bold Horizon album, the most recent record I did, I totally did that. Like most of the record is pentatonic scales being displaced over different chords. So back to our blues again. So if I play over the 5 chord, I'm going to play a mixed Lydian scale. So over the 1 chord, I'm going like this. And again, there's a lesson on the channel about the most important note in the blues, I think it's called. And there's also one about how to play the blues with guide tones. And those 2 lessons are getting into this whole process here. And over the 4 chord, I'm going to replace the 6 with a 7 like this. And over the 5 chord, play mixed Lydian. Let's see what happens. That's kind of the idea. It will hopefully work for you to do some of those concepts. I'll do some more lessons on the blues on how to do that more specifically. So hopefully that was helpful for answering some questions there. So now we're dealing with a harmonic minor scale, right? Aeolian mode had this flat 7. So then this raised 7 happened. So 2 things kind of came about. One is we had this leading tone we talked about. So we're not skipping that last step like when you're walking up the steps as a kid and you skip that last step. Now we're walking on that last step. The next thing that happened, and probably more importantly, was in the 5 chord, now we have a dominant sound. Right? Now why does that matter? We talked about how the major scale has a dominant sound for the 5 chord, which resolves back to 1, right? So if I play this, back to this Game of Thrones thing again. This is Aeolian. G's, right? Let's see, yeah, C. So you see how that's kind of sound dated? So if I try to play a melody, it's going to sound very dated. Kind of cool. So, whenever the people that made that movie did that, they wanted to sound like it was like medieval times or something, even though it was in a different world, a whole different galaxy or universe or whatever, different time period, I have no idea. It sounds very much like it should be something from the Renaissance period, right? So, what happened then was the composers said, okay, well, we're going to raise this 7th instead. What happened was we ended up getting this 5 chord, which is dominant. So now, let me change my battery here quickly on my, I think my, hopefully that's not going to die. I just changed the battery on that. Okay, we'll try our best. Looks like my battery might die. And if it does, I will be live streaming again in a few moments afterwards, right back on the same channel again. Hopefully that doesn't kick the bucket to put new batteries in that. All right, so if you look at a song like this, now we have this raised fifth, the major third on the 5 chord, on the 5 chord. So now it sounds more modern, right? So if I go like, sweet dreams and melodies. It's very much harmonic minor. If I played that as melodic minor, it would be like this. Sweet dreams and melodies. It sounds really weird, right? This is the sound we're used to. If I go, see, that's the sound we're used to. That raised 5. So harmonic minor did that. So this is kind of the gypsy sound, right? It sounds like gypsy music. No, if you listen to Randy Rhoads or any of those kind of metal guys from the 80s, they use this scale all the time. It's a really popular scale for back then. But it's also a whole other subject. If you look at the modes of the modes, take harmonic minor and learn the 7 modes of harmonic minor, you get some really cool sounds like this thing, this Phrygian sharp 3, raised 3rd. That's the sound that Django Reinhardt used in the gypsy jazz era, right? So play this G7 chord like this. Okay, let's make it swing more. Cool sound. So what's happening there is we have this ultratone. We have a flat 9 and a sharp 5. So there's 2 outside notes in that scale. Really cool. It's a mode of harmonic minor. It's called Phrygian dominant. That's what it's called. So this is the sound of harmonic minor. So it sounds really kind of exotic, right? And there's lots and lots and lots of music that's written with this sound. I love the sound personally. I jam on this all the time. But music evolved beyond that, and they said, okay, that's cool. We have this leading tone now. We have this 5 chord is dominant. That's awesome. We're happy about that. However, it still sounds too exotic. We don't like this augmented second. It sounds way too, I don't know, exotic. So what happened next was they created something called the Melodic Minor Scale, where they raised not only this 7, but they also raised this 6. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, you can see it's a major scale, right? With a flat 3rd. So they've actually gone all the way almost to the point where you're playing a major scale. It's now a major scale with a flat 3rd. The Melodic Minor Scale. That's where music sort of evolved to. It's really neat. So there's jazz melodic minor scale, and then there's the standard classical melodic minor scale. They're different things. In classical melodic minor scale, you have this raised note, these 2 raised notes, the 6 and the 7, going up when you're ascending. When you're descending, you're going to flat them, because it would sound really bad if you didn't, right? So how many progressions do you know in life that go like this? And almost an endless amount of tunes do this. Songs do that, right? On the way up, we could play this like we can go like play D minor, and we're playing sort of the chords of the key. If we play this diminished chord as the 7 chord before the 1 chord, on the way back down, that sounds terrible. Maybe not terrible. We're not used to this sound. So the composers are like, wow, that's too much of a leap on the way back down. Doesn't sound good. Let's make it raised on the way up and flatted on the way back down. So we have this like flatted going back down, raised, flatted. So that's kind of where we ended up with the melodic minor scale. So we have Aeolian mode, which is the natural minor scale, has nothing raised. Very prevalent in today's world. You hear it all the time. I mean, probably millions of songs are written that way. Harmonic minor, raise the 7, and then a melodic minor, raise the 6th and the 7, ascending, flatted going jazz melodic minor scales are raised ascending and descending. And what happens with those scales is we use those to superimpose those over other chords. And by doing so, we create other tensions. We can have other outside notes, like Lydian dominant's a big one. That's a really cool sound. So that's another way of using that scale. Okay, so when we're practicing these scales, how do you learn them? How do we cement this into our vocabulary to be able to utilize these scales, right? So I don't know if you know major scales yet. You probably want to start with learning your major scale patterns, but let's do one kind of 2-octave version of each one of these scales to practice, so you can compare and contrast and learn how to do both of those. Again, we'll kind of do A minor as our template here to play over these scales, these chords here. All right, so check it out. If I play this, I'm going to play 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8. And when you have a 5-fret span for this 3-note per string pattern concept, you want to use fingers 1, 2, and 4 most of the time. Harmonic minor will be different. You'll see that requires different fingering. So playing 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 8, 10. And that's 7, 8, 10, 8, 7, 10. So it sounds like this. Sounds very much like a kind of an old-fashioned minor sound. So let's illustrate that real quick here. Let me put some chorus on for this. Things sound kind of pretty here. Let's go like actually, let's have some fun. What do you think? Let's do this. Let's go with a nice spacey sounding thing when we do this. It's time to have some fun. That's what I think. Okay, that sounds cool. So here we go. So I'm going to play that same scale pattern. So it's like 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 8, 10, 7, 8, 10. So you start to improvise with this, you kind of get some stuff going on with that. Stay in the same position for the purpose of seeing how this works if you want to create some melodies with it. So you can play that all over the entire guitar neck. I would implore you to learn 3-note per string patterns in all 7 positions across the guitar, so you can do this anywhere. Remember, this is Aeolian. Okay, so that's what Aeolian sounds like. Harmonic minor, again, we are going to raise that 7th like this. So what does that require us to do harmonically? Well, we have to put a 5 chord in that has that dominant 7th chord. All right, so maybe we'll do a different kind of track on this one. This time we're going to do, let's do like a again, the scale here, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, 6, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, and then it goes 6, 9, 10. There's that leaf, that augmented second. Position only. Learn your 3-number string patterns across the entire guitar neck. You can play the same scale anywhere on the guitar neck. Now you're probably thinking, okay, that sounds a lot like Yngwie, right? I mean, not what I'm playing with the scale. That's the scale Yngwie uses all the time. It's also, you can make it sound very kind of Spanishy if you do some different rhythms, like. Okay, so that's harmonic minor. That's a cool sound. Melodic minor is a different animal altogether. So melodic minor, remember, we'll kind of do a little, let's do a little rhythm here. We're going to climb up like that. Then we're going to go all the way back down because it's going to be raised going up and flat going down, right? There's the 1 chord. There's the 4 chord. 5 chord, and then we're going to go 7, 6, 5. So it's going to sound like this. Something like that. So we're going to go down. Up. On the way back down, we have to flat things. Check this out. So that's flat going back down again. Actually, that should be a D major chord. Let's try that again. Kind of cool sounding. So it's different on the way up than on the way back down. So those are the 3 types of minor scales. So let's see if there's any questions for anybody out there. Anybody have any questions about anything at all with guitar? Any questions at all? Got Aeolian. Turn off this spacey sound and stuff. That's called a plexiverb, by the way. It's a really cool sound here on the Fractal Audio Axe FX3. Aeolian, Harmonic Minor, Melodic Minor. Make sure you go and learn your scale patterns. Do 3-note per string patterns if you can across the entire guitar neck to learn those 3 different scales. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. Next Wednesday at 1:30, I'll be doing this again. I plan on doing this every week, and hopefully it'll get more smooth every time. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave comments in the comment section down below. And if you have any questions about guitar along the way, please feel free to ask. Looking forward to doing these live streaming events. It's pretty fun. All right.